essentially a weed is any plant growing where you don't want it. So it could be any kind of plant. And if it's not in the right place, it's called a weed. Then we have non-native, alien, and exotic species. So that is a plant or a species that's been taken from its native habitat and put in a new environment outside of its normal or local range. So something that doesn't naturally or historically occur in an area. Then we have invasive species, which are generally the plants that don't have natural controls that serve to limit their populations in their native range. So a lot of our native species are controlled by weather patterns or climate or pathogens or diseases or insects that help to control them and keep them from getting out of control, like some of our invasive species that spread all over. And then we have the category of noxious weeds. So they fit all of those other categories, and then they've also been legally designated by a listing authority as a pest. So that listing authority could be the Oregon Department of Agriculture or a county weed control district or a soil and water conservation district, or just somebody has said this plant is a noxious weed. And our noxious weeds can cause injury to agriculture and other horticultural crops, natural habitats and ecosystems, and humans or livestock. Some of the characteristics of noxious weeds and invasive plants, again, they lack those natural enemies to keep their populations in check. They're almost always non-native plants. They grow really fast, they reproduce quickly, and have effective means of dispersing their seeds. Their seeds can last a really long time in the soil. Some thistle species, their seeds can last almost 100 years in the soil, which is just amazing. Our invasive plants have few habitat restrictions, so they can grow in sunny conditions, they can grow in dry conditions, they can grow in shady conditions, and they also can have the ability to form single species stands. So think about blackberries and how you can see big, huge mounds. And this plant here in the picture is called puncture vine, and it gets its name from these seeds. You can see this is the seed head right here, and there's individual seeds, and they have these very pointy spines, and they're like three-sided, and they have spines on the other side too. And these can pop your bike tires or pop your car tires, but that's also to their advantage because then they stick in your car and bike tires and get transported a long way, helping with their dispersal. Some of the impacts of noxious weeds, they can outcompete other plants for resources such as water, nutrients, and sunlight. They cost a lot to control. $125 million is spent a year in Oregon controlling invasive species. They can take over fish and wildlife habitat and destroy that habitat. Some can be toxic to people and animals. They can increase erosion. This kind of all goes back to the root structure. A lot of our invasive plants don't have very deep roots, so they don't do a very good job of holding in the soil along streams. They can spread rapidly, and they can decrease crop yields and decrease property values. So one thing that's really important is to help stop the spread of invasive species, and there's several ways to do that. Make sure when you're out and about, drive only on established roads or hike and walk only on established trails, so you're not walking off trail and potentially collecting seeds in your shoes or on your pants or on your clothing or on your pets. So, and then learn to identify what invasive weeds are, tell other people about them, and if you are hiking off trail or walking in weedy areas, please clean your shoes and boots and clothing after you've been in that area so you're not transporting it to your car or other places. And again, prevention is the first line of defense. So again, make sure you clean areas, make sure you clean your tools, your boots. If you're in an area that are infested, clean off your pets as well. You can prune and bag the flowers and seed heads if you can't control the plants right away, at least prevent it from going to seed. Again, learn to identify problem species, and then if you do see some invasive species, early control is really great to get on top of it before it becomes a problem. And continuing on that idea of control, there's generally 4 main methods that include mechanical, which is kind of mechanical or manual, physically removing the weeds. Cultural control involves prohibiting weed growth in different areas through different means. Biological control is using a natural predator to control the plants. And then chemical is using herbicides. So please note that some chemicals can have restricted use around streams, and we always encourage people to read the label and use herbicides according to the label, and always ask questions. Consult with an agronomist or your agronomy center, or call the Oregon Department of Agriculture if you have questions about the use of different herbicides. This is a great slide showing the biological control on tansy ragwort. These caterpillars, the black and yellow caterpillars, are from the cinnabar moth, and they're a great biological control. You can see that they're eating the leaves and flowers off of the tansy ragwort. There's another biological control called a flea beetle that actually does better than the tansy than the cinnabar moth for controlling tansy. So there's some great biological controls out there, even though you might see a lot of tansy in different fields. Just know that there are some biological controls that are out there working on it as well. Integrated pest management, and that's essentially using different methods and combining them to control invasive plants, such as mechanical control. And herbicide is a great way to control blackberries. So the idea there is that you would mow the blackberries down first and then use herbicides after you've cut them down. So you reduce the amount of herbicide that you're using, and you're not spraying a huge blackberry patch. You're just spraying on the ground and the small sprouts that are regrowing. And after you've done your control method, just make sure that you monitor the site and treat any regrowth or new populations, which could be required for several years to get an invasive population under control. And then once you think you have control of your site, then follow up by actively planting native species back into that habitat, and make sure that you're always on the lookout for new sprouts that pop up and control them right away. And this, I really like this because it helps you learn different timings and what timings for control methods are the most effective. So here, this is for blackberries, and across the top you can see it goes through the months of the year. I cropped this off. It does show the entire year, but I just blew it up to make it so you could read it. And then here it goes down the side. It talks about mechanical control, manual or mechanical cultural options, different chemical control options, and then a combination of that mechanical and chemical that I mentioned in the previous slide. And then this shows you also the growth stage too. So from February through April, blackberries are growing, and then May through June and into July is when they flower. And then it also shows when they set seed. So then it gives you the time of month and what to do to control different plants for those months. And this is a part of an OSU publication about managing blackberries in Western Oregon riparian areas. And essentially this is saying that the most effective treatment for blackberries is what I mentioned previously, is that you cut them down first in mid to late summer, allow them to regrow back to 12 to 18 inches, and then use herbicide in fall on that regrowth. And it's really important to use herbicides in fall on blackberries, because that's when they're starting to go dormant and they're pulling all the nutrients and resources down into their roots. And that will help pull that herbicide down into the roots and kill the plants as well. If you have invasive species on your property, you can report them to the Oregon Invasives Hotline. An expert can help give you information on how to control them, or can put you in touch with additional resources and information about the plant. Or if you find something that you're not sure what it is, you can take pictures and upload pictures, and experts will help you identify what your plant is. This can also be used for insects and other kinds of plants too. So there's all different kinds of resource experts on here. A couple additional resources for invasive plant information is the Oregon Department of Agriculture, the Oregon Invasive Species Council, Marion County Weed Control District, and a source that I really like to use that has great information is actually in Washington State, the King County Noxious Weed Control. Another great resource is the Oregon Garden Smart Guide, and this shows you different invasive species and tells you why they're invasive, and then gives you alternatives that are native plants and ornamental plants that look similar.